Hey guys, welcome back to this series of tutorials for those who have been watching, and for those who are new, welcome as well to this channel. And today we're going to continue with the cart as well as checkout. Let me quickly log in and show you what we're going to do in this short video. I'm going to put my email address to sign in. Express food, it's supposed to be small letters, expressfood@gmail.com, and put the password. We have done all this in previous videos already, and if you are new to this tutorial, I will recommend you to check the previous videos so that you are on the same page with everyone else. As you can see, we are building a complete food delivery app in React Native and Firebase, and I'm not gonna try to recap everything, but I will leave the description to the previous videos in the description section areas. So I'll leave the links to the previous videos in the description area, and from there you will be able to catch up with what you have. So right now I'm going to try and place an order for a food. I'm going to be placing the order with this restaurant. You can see there are multiple restaurants which you can place order with. In this case you have KFC and Steers and so forth, Roman pizza. You can pick up any restaurant. Let me pick McDonald's and quickly place an order. I'm gonna be placing order for Big Mac. And now once I've chosen Big Mac as my meal, you can see that description on top here, and now I have to add some preferences. Okay, so you can decide to add a drink. We have coded this already. You can decide to add some types of sauce, and you have the maximum number there that you can select. You cannot select more than that. In this one you can only select 2. That means we have a choices of 2 sauce. For example, you can take BBQ, or you can take sweet and sour, and so forth. But so far in your project, if you select one like this, in my case it's selecting because I've coded that already, but if you click there you won't be able to select anything because we have not done that yet. And this is what we're going to implement in this video, that you are able to select per the required quantity. What I mean, you are able to select by the per the required quantity is that, for example, there we only have 2 required and I have 2 selections already. If I try to click on the third one, I won't be able to select because it's only 2 that are required. But if I remove that, I remove one selection, then take this one, then you can see it's selecting. So we're going to code this conditional selection, and the condition will be the quantity required. So this is what we're going to do, and this applies to all of the preferences. For example, on this the condition is 1 required, so if I click there it still select, but if I go for the second one, then it doesn't select because the condition is that you can only take 1 item. And if I unselect that one and then take another selection, in this case small stony, then you can see that it's really selecting. I can again remove that, put small apple juice, it's working. So this is what we're going to implement, and this is really not simple. It requires some complex coding for you to implement these features, to include the conditional selection, as you can see. And this feature, you could see it if you open the Uber Eats app. If you have seen that application, you will see that they have also implemented this conditional selection for the preferences of food. Okay, that being said, let's begin coding. you can go to your source code. Let me just save this. You can go to your source code, and inside your source folder, go to the screen folder. You should have a folder like this one. And as I said, if you are watching this video for the very first time, please watch the previous videos as well, because I can't keep repeating everything in this video. So you'll find the links in the description area. And yeah, so open the source folder, and inside your source folder, go to the screen folder, and inside the screen folder, open the preference screen file. So this is the one. I've got mine open already, preference screen.js file. And inside this, the first thing that we're going to include, let me show you something. We first have to create some counter data so that we are able to count how many selection have taken place. So far, as I said, if you click anything on your project, nothing select, right? And you say that this has to be conditional selection, and the condition is the quantity of item required, and this quantity we're going to be getting it from the database, because remember, this app has got hundreds of restaurants in your city or in your country. So each restaurant will have their preferences for their menus, and each menu will have its preference, and each preference will have the quantity required per preference. So all this data will be coming from the database, the quantity required per restaurant. So there's nothing that we'll be getting from our UI from the user interface. Everything will be coming from the server. So in this case, I'm going to create some data which we're going to be getting later on from the database. So let me make this bigger. I hope I'm clear in what I'm saying, but if you don't understand yet what we're doing, you can just follow for now, and by the end of this video you will understand exactly why we've been doing all that. So you're gonna have a counter, and this counter will be getting some data from the server, and this will be counting the number of items the user has selected from their preference. So for now, I'm getting this data from a local database, which I've just called menu detail data, but this will be easy to change when we start coding the back end with Firebase. And inside here, I'm gonna say this dot props. Actually, this is outside of the state. Sorry, this is supposed to be outside, because we're going to be getting data from the state. So this is another instance variable that we're creating. So it's supposed to be outside like this, and then we're gonna grab the data from the route, depending on the route, and then route.params dot index, and then we say dot counter data. Let me just explain what I'm doing here. So we have grabbed this data, which is just the index of your route. The reason why we have to grab that is because we have to get dynamic data. For example, if I take this menu Big Mac, it will have its own preference, right? And if I go back and take, let's say, hand cut chips, it will have also its own preference. You can see we have hand cut chips there and different preferences. And in order to do that, we have to know first of all what menu did the user select, and that we do it by grabbing the index. I hope that is clear, but otherwise just keep following for now and code what I'm coding, and everything will become clear by the end of the video. So once you have selected that, we have created this counter, then now we can begin coding. All right, so I'm going to create a touchable opacity, so we have to import that. I've imported it already. In my case, it's here. Import touchable opacity component from React Native, and then scroll down. We scroll down to this view here. Okay, this is the view which is creating the word. This is the view that create all these checkboxes. Okay, so that being said, we're going to wrap this view inside a touchable component. So we're gonna say touchable opacity. We cut that and paste it at the bottom of this view to close the tag. And we're gonna have to pass the key property so that we don't get errors since we're mapping this component. So we're gonna say key, and the key we're gonna pass item. We're gonna pass item dot key or dot id instead. So we're grabbing this and we get the ID of each item that will be rendered. And then we're gonna have to grab a press event. We're gonna say on press, we need to do something. We need to select what we need as preference. Okay, so the first thing that we're gonna do, we're gonna have to find out what is the ID of the item clicked. So we're gonna say const ID. We need to grab that ID of the items or the preferences where the user is currently. Let me try to explain that further. Just gonna open the emulator. For example, if I click on this one, the preferences, I am right now in choose your two dips, right? And for example, if I click on this one, I have to know that I'm under this preference here, which is choose your first drink flavor. So we need to know where we are when the user is clicking the preference. That's why we have to grab this ID. So I'm gonna say ID will be equal to this dot preference. Okay, and we get the index of that preference item. So we're gonna say index of. This is a JavaScript method that we're applying to this object or array. So we say index of, and then we pass the item which we want to get the index of, right? And this item, we're getting it from this. It's the same item that we're putting there, and we want to get that index, and then we're gonna get it here as, we save it here as an ID. That being done, now we have to select the item. We're going to perform some conditional selection, as I said. So the condition is, first of all, we check the quantity required. That's the condition. As I said, this is the condition for your selection. If it's 1, you can only select 1. If it's, for example, 2 in this case, you can only take 2 selection here. So we're going to say that we're going to say if this dot state dot minimum quantity required, we pass the ID because it has to be for the specific preference, and we say if this is not equal to, this is not null. If this is not null, that means it's available. Then we can perform some code. We can execute some codes here. And the code, we're going to create another const. We call it check. And this check will filter the items. So I'm gonna say item dot filter items, and this will return items dot minimum quantity, and we pass again the ID to that. For now, just keep following what I'm doing. All things will become clear just soon. And once this is done, we're gonna then grab the preference state. Gonna say this dot state dot preference. We pass again the ID. Then we're gonna map this for each. You can use for each, and then we grab the item. And we say if the item that we've just grabbed now dot ID is equal to items dot ID. That means that is what we want to select, and then we're gonna now check. We know what we want to select from this statement. If this is true, if we know that okay, this is the right item that we want to select, now we have to check the condition before we actually confirm the selection. So I'm gonna say if again check dot length is less than this dot state dot minimum preference or minimum quantity, and we pass the ID to it. If this is true, that means you have not exceeded yet the required quantity. Let me just show you. So what we're doing here is that this statement, what it does is it checks when you have selected one item. It checks to see that if the number of selection that has taken place in this menu so far is still less than this quantity here, the required quantity, minimum quantity, then you can perform that selection. Okay, in that case, then we're gonna say let me just make this code a bit neat. I'm just gonna push this there so you have a better view. All right, from here open the curly brackets like that, and then I'm gonna say I dot checked. We give it the opposite of I dot checked, and here we're gonna say else. Else we keep it false. That means we can't select anything because the maximum quantity required has been reached already. So we're gonna say I dot checked else. We keep it false because we can't allow you to select beyond the required quantity. So we're gonna say this will be equal to false. So I hope so far it's clear. So what we've done is very simple. We're trying to select something, and we say that if, for example, the quantity here is greater than what was required, that means we're gonna execute this. We're gonna decline the selection. If you don't still get it, it's okay. We're still coding, and I promise that by the end of this you will understand exactly why we have done all this. Okay, and we're gonna continue again. Now we've selected this, you have to update our state. So what we're gonna say is outside of this we're gonna say this dot state dot counter ID, pass the ID, and we say this will be equal to this dot state. So we're updating our state now with the current result. It's counter ID, we pass the ID, and then we're gonna say increment because there's been one selection that has taken place. So we're gonna say this will be equal to that plus 1. We just say that okay, one selection has taken place. We update our counter, and we're also gonna update the preference. We're gonna say this dot state, sorry, this dot set state, and inside here we're gonna update the preference. The preference, which is an object, and then here we're gonna spread the updated preference. Okay, so we're gonna say this dot state dot preference. We're also gonna update the counter. So we're gonna say counter, we spread the current state of the counter. I'm gonna say this dot state dot counter, like that. Okay, and now we are here. So this is the first condition for this if statement, right? We say that if the minimum quantity is not null, that means you are allowed to make a selection. But now we have also to say if you are not allowed, that means you're gonna use the else. You're gonna use you're gonna be coding in the else, and inside here gonna say okay, if the user cannot perform any further selection, I say this dot state this dot state dot preference, and we pass the ID to it dot for each and here we're gonna say if i.id equal to items dot id. It means it's the right selection indeed, but just that you're not allowed to perform any further selection because of the maximum quantity required. Then we're gonna say I dot checked equal to opposite of I dot checked. Okay. And let me just check something. Just want to make sure that there's no errors with this bracket. Okay. And also we're going to set the state. So we're gonna say this dot set state, then we pass the preference object, give it the new values, apply spread operator, this dot state dot preference, like that. Okay, and then you can go to scroll down to the checkbox. This is what you've done previously. So instead of keeping it to true, we're gonna now give it this items dot checked, because this is now the data we're getting from our database or our server, and so this will be getting the state from the data from data store, which we have created locally for now, and we're gonna implement it on Firebase later on. Okay, so that being said, let's save and see if this works. We can now open our emulator to see. Let me just close it for now. I'll restart it. Open the Express Food app. It's taking a bit of time for the emulator to load. Alright, so we are here signed in. I'm gonna check the food, the restaurant, and I'm gonna place an order. I'm gonna take limited offer, that means there might be some discount, and take one selection. I'm gonna take a Big Mac. Okay, we're gonna sort out this later. Now let's see the selection. Okay, we're getting some errors. Let me check what the problem is. Okay, let's go to our code and see what needs to be changed. First of all, this is a problem. This is supposed to be taken from the state, so we need to add this dot state. Did omit that there. Okay, get that right. Can make sure we change that. There have been some mistakes there, and also this code here, I think this is not the right lines of code that's supposed to be here. So delete this part, and items dot write the following checked, and if that is true, return items, else we can return now, like that. And the other thing that I wanted, make sure this is the same as what you have on your code. The other thing you can see at the bottom here, we're accessing counter from the state. You see this, and we're setting counter also within the state, because this is inside the set state. So we have to make sure we put this inside the state. I think this was a mistake. Just delete this comma here. Got that. This is also a problem. Put it there. So this should be fine. Save it, and let's see if this solves the problem. Gonna go back to our emulator. Here we are. So I'm going to try to select. Awesome, the selection is taking place. We can see here the condition is 2 required. We cannot select more than 2. If I click the second one, it's still selecting. If I go to the third one, you can see now it's refusing to select the third one. So if I unselect one and then select this one, you can see now the selection is working. So our code are working 100%. We can do the same on this preference. Choose your first drink flavor, and you are only given one option, which is one required. We can take one. Small Coke, it's working. If I take the second one, then it's not working. So this is fine, this is perfectly working. You can do the same for the rest of the preferences, and you can have countless number of preferences. So if you click there, it's now not selecting because one has been selected already, and the condition here is one required. Okay, so we're going to stop here for this video. We're going to continue in the next one. In the next one, we're going to implement now the cart, so that when all those selections are calculated and the total price reflected here. And yeah, I think that will be the next part of the video. Thanks for watching, and if you're not subscribed yet, please remember to subscribe and like this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Until then, take care and keep safe. Bye bye.